This is Art History with Kenneth on the KJL Podcast Channel, a series where timeless masterpieces are brought to life through the lens of artist and host, Kenneth J. Lewis Sr. Each episode takes viewers on a visual and historical journey, uncovering the stories, styles, and significance behind the world's most influential artists and art movements. From bold brushstrokes to revolutionary ideas, this is where the past meets creative perspective. The journey begins now.
Welcome to the Art History Show on the KJL Podcast Channel. In this episode of Southern Artist Series, we journey into the heart of memory, rendered not in words, but in color and brushstroke. Helen LaFrance painted the soul of the South, and in doing so, preserved a world disappearing before her eyes. Today, we explore the life, vision, and spiritual depth of a woman who gave us not only images of what was, but a glimpse into what still lives in the Southern imagination. This is Scenes of the Soul, the art of Helen LaFrance. Helen LaFrance was born in Graves County, Kentucky in 1919, the daughter of a farmer and a deeply religious mother. She was raised in a household where faith, hard work, and storytelling were the foundations of daily life. Her parents didn't have money, but they had memory, and they made sure she understood the value of it. LaFrance was homeschooled by her mother until the age of 12. Though she had some formal schooling afterward, most of her learning came from lived experience. Her family picked cotton, canned fruit, raised livestock, and gathered for Sunday suppers. These moments, so ordinary on the surface, would become the very scenes she would later paint with astonishing emotional clarity. From a young age, she showed artistic ability, drawing on grocery sacks and scraps of paper. But it wasn't until later in life that she truly devoted herself to painting. For much of her adult life, she worked in hospitals, cleaned homes, and painted in the quiet hours between shifts. Helen LaFrance is best known for what scholars call memory paintings, a deeply personal genre where the artist recreates scenes from memory, often rooted in childhood or community experience. For LaFrance, these works were less about nostalgia and more about cultural preservation. Her paintings capture moments of everyday rural Black life, church revivals, baptisms in the creek, quilting bees, and farming scenes. They were vibrant and rhythmic, often filled with motion and communal activity. LaFrance painted largely from imagination. Her compositions weren't pre-sketched or measured. She let the memory guide the brush. These intuitive methods created a dreamlike quality in her work, what some describe as spiritual realism. The color palette she used, earthy browns, sky blues, cotton white, and the greens of Kentucky fields, grounded her work in a very specific place. But the emotional tone, that was universal. Faith was central to Helen LaFrance's life and her work. Alongside her memory paintings, she created deeply moving religious imagery, visions of heaven and hell, the crucifixion, angels, and devils, all painted in a raw, expressive style that drew from folk, religion, church teachings, and her own inner world. These spiritual paintings weren't just depictions of doctrine, they were meditations. In one piece, souls ascend to heaven in glowing white robes. In another, red flames lick at the edges of a scene filled with serpents and screaming faces. There's something deeply intuitive about the way she presents these themes. Like she's not just illustrating stories from the Bible, but channeling the emotion behind them. Her religious art feels less like preaching and more like prophecy. Coming up next, how Helen LaFrance's work, once created in silence, began to find its way into galleries, museums, and the American art canon. Stay with us.
You're watching KJL Podcast Channel, home of Art with Kenneth, where he paints live, shares techniques, and talks all things art. The Art History Show, highlighting legendary artists from the past and their lasting impact. The Muse Unveiled Show experience, where real people become timeless works of art. Don't miss the gallery and museum tour show, taking you through inspiring exhibitions and creative spaces across the country. Join us monthly for coffee, tea, paint and sip, a relaxed, hands-on event at the KJL Art Sanctuary. Commissioned accepted, and now is the perfect time to begin your journey as a collector. Want to support the channel? Tap the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description. Plan your visit to the KJL Art Sanctuary Gallery and Studio at 310 4th Street, Ewing, New Jersey. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the KJL Podcast Channel, where art dwells, breathes, and inspires. Now back to the show.
For decades, Helen LaFrance painted in relative obscurity. It wasn't until the late 20th century that collectors and curators began to take serious notice. In the 1980s and 90s, her work started appearing in galleries across the South and then nationally. Art critic and curator Kathy Moses was one of the early champions of LaFrance's work, calling her a true memory painter with a remarkable visual vocabulary. Others began to follow suit, recognizing not just her technical talent, but her cultural importance. She never sought fame. She didn't travel in art circles, but slowly her name entered the conversations about American folk and outsider art. Her paintings were acquired by the Smithsonian, the Kentucky Folk Art Center, and numerous private collections. Yet she remained in her home, painting until her hands no longer allowed her to. Helen LaFrance passed away in 2020 at the age of 101. By the time of her death, she had created hundreds of works, many of which now serve as a primary visual records of a way of life rarely documented. Her legacy isn't just in museums, it's in the hearts of those who see their own families, their own towns, and their own memories reflected in her canvases. In many ways, LaFrance was a historian, not through writing, but through painting. Her brush chronicles lives that might otherwise be forgotten. Those Sunday sermons, barn dances, and harvest under the Kentucky sun. Today, her work continues to inspire a new generation of artists and collectors who value authenticity over acclaim, story over spectacle. Helen LaFrance showed us that memory is not a thing of the past, it's alive in art, in color, and in spirit. I'm Kenneth J. Lewis Sr., and this is another episode of Art History on the KJL Podcast Channel in our Southern Artist Series. And remember to stay visionary, stay open, and always dig deeper.
Thank you for watching Art History with Kenneth on the KJL Podcast Channel. If this episode inspired, informed, or intrigued you, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more. Kenneth J. Lewis Sr. returns every other week with more captivating stories from the art world, exploring the legends, the techniques, and the timeless works that continue to shape our creative world. Until the next brushstroke in history, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep the art alive.